If nothing else, it was quite beautiful out here. From here, I could see that a thick fog encircled the tor the abbey was built upon, almost as if it were nestled in the eye of a great storm. Down the steep hill, I could just barely make out the nearest village. The little buildings were situated on the edge of a lake so large that it disappeared into the mist. We're so far from the village. It's rather strange. Truthfully, what isn't strange around here? True. But even the architecture is not what I would have expected. I had noticed, actually, that the Abbey's buildings don't quite line up with St. Gall's plan, or the Romanesque plan. Our Abbey was built in somewhat curious circumstances, I'm told. I'd believe it. It was evidently not laid out by a master architect. Do you have any idea why? Because it would have cost a great deal more money to build it properly, I suspect. Well, money's no object when it comes to the house of worship, surely. That is sadly not how it works. Often it falls to a generous benefactor to fund a new community. The great halls of Kirkstall, for example, were paid for by a lord. Bungay Priory was paid for by a countess. Linbarrow Tor, well, I'd like to know, to tell you the truth. You don't know who actually funded this place. No. I'm not the first abbess, and I'm hopefully not the last. The history of our community was not particularly well recorded. I hope you can improve that once we're free of this foul mystery. I turned to look at the monastery from a distance. Even from far away, I could see that it was a fairly dilapidated, oddly situated, and altogether somewhat crooked. How old is it? I'm afraid I don't know that either. Monasteries serve many purposes. Way houses, centers of learning and study, beacons of spiritual guidance for local communities. Linbarrow is none of these. I would quite like to see it become one day. Another reason why our mission is of utmost importance. This place is falling apart, Sister Hedwig. I understand. The superior nodded, and we continued walking to the hospitalum. A bald, eroded mountaintop. Okay. So it's kind of like plateau vibes. So the abbey is like situated on this eroded mountaintop that kind of sets itself up as like a foundation for the whole thing to be built on. The hospitalum was an odd little building. It looked like a piece of the chapel that had broken off and was placed in the middle of a field with nothing but a beaten path indicating that it was meant to be part of any larger community. I was somewhat relieved that it was not readily visible until we'd crested a small hillock during our walk. We didn't go in through the front door. Instead, the superior bade me follow her around to the back of the building, to a smaller door. I could see a hole where the wall of the building met the ground as we walked past. This really was a haphazardly constructed place. Watch the stairs. They're quite steep. She produced the same key ring that had taunted me so when I heard it in my cell, and it was impossible not to gasp as the door swung open and I saw what lay inside. A stone staircase led down into what looked like a cellar, only there were iron bars splitting the room in half. I jumped as a figure scurried out of the dark corner of this horrible room. He looked panicked, slightly younger than I, to be sure. His clothes, rumpled, and his hair was messy. There was a putrid stench lingering in the room that I did not want to guess the source of. He might have had a boyish charm under better circumstances, but imprisonment had clearly taken its toll. I was struck with a rush of pity when our eyes met. He rushed forward, throwing himself against the bars and gripping them with bloodied fingers. He pressed his face between them to bring us as close together as he possibly could. "Oh, thank God!" Step back, boy, if only a little. I couldn't bend these bars. Believe me, I've tried. Nevertheless, his eyes darted between the superior's and my own a few times before he relented. He took a step back, breathed deeply. He really was a pathetic sight to behold. This is Sister Hedwig. She would like to ask you some questions. Questions? What bloody questions could you possibly ask? Did you kill Sister Catherine? No, I didn't kill no one. He paused for a moment, looking me up and down, and then turned to the superior. That's it? You've held me in here for how long? Had me wait in this shithole while you promised to get me help? And you bring me another nun to ask the same goddamn question I've answered over and over already? Have you no shame? I'm sorry. If you were, I wouldn't be locked up in here. Hedwig, I will wait outside. Conduct your questioning with some haste, so we can be back in time for luncheon. What do you want? You're sure you did not kill her, you promise? What good is my word? You've already decided. You have no evidence, but neither do I. Well, it would matter to me that the mouth that lies kills the soul, as it's written. Aye, that they do. Are you a God-fearing man? As much as anyone around here is. Then would you promise me you did not kill Catherine? It doesn't matter what promise I could offer. Promise me. The stable boy recoiled in shock. I was surprised myself. I'd stamped my foot down so hard it had kicked up dust from the filthy cellar floor and had lingered in the air for a while as the young man and I stared at each other. I promise. I swear to you, I've never killed nobody, least of all some poor woman. I believe you. Fantastic. And now where does that leave us? I have more questions. Of course you do. Why were you here that night? I made the mail and supply deliveries sometimes from the village. At night? Not usually, no. I'd forgotten something. It was a letter. I saw it laying in the dirt when I got to the bottom of the hill, and I came back first thing next morning to deliver it. What was in the letter? How should I know? I'm no murderer, and I'm no thief neither. Of course, that was a silly question. From where I'm standing, all your questions are worth just the same. I want to get you out of here. I really want to help you. You lot keep saying that, but if you wanted to help, you could just open the door and set me free. Let me go home. I don't have the key. Then you could call your bloody superior down and have her do it. I can't. She wouldn't. Then how can you help me? This isn't fair. It isn't right. Isn't this a convent? Why do you witches even have a dungeon? He raised an honest point. For extreme situations like this, I suppose. Will I ever see a judge? Or do you lot still do the ordeals around here? I don't know. Fat lot of good your help is to me, then. I want to prove your innocence. Who to? To everyone. Your superior says she believes me as well. If you believe me, that's well and good, but clearly something else is keeping me here. Oh, who am I meant to answer to instead of a jury? I'll tell you what I think. I don't think you believe me at all. You or her. I think you're just keeping me calm before you put me down like a lame horse. Superior! Mother Superior! The door swung open after a moment. Are you finished? No. I have a question for you, actually. Very well. Why can't we just let him go? I would have thought that was obvious. Justice must be done one way or another, lest we risk open revolt from the other sisters. They want blood, one way or another. So what happens next if you don't prove my innocence? The bishop will decide. The bishop? Yes, he has been informed of the general situation. When he makes his usual visit at the end of the month to deliver the sacraments, he will deal with it, along with any other business. So no matter what, someone is going to be handed over to him? Yes, and I want that to be the right person. I will wait outside once more for you two to finish up. Do hurry. This is hopeless. You're no constable. Please, just help me to do my best. Tell me the whole story of the morning you were caught, and don't overlook any details. All right. I arrived late with that missing letter, and I noticed that the sister I normally hand him off to wasn't there when I would normally find her. And where's that? The library. She did a lot of the writing as far as I know. Did you check anywhere else? Well, I didn't want to overstay my welcome, especially at night. And I wouldn't dare poke my head into the dorms, but she wasn't in that misery what's-it neither. Who did you end up giving the letter to? I don't know everyone's names. I don't know your name even. It's Hedwig. Sister Hedwig. I'm James. James Foreman. I wish I could say it was a pleasure. James offered me a grim, humorless smile. I was looking for someone else to give it to for a bit. I just don't know the place very well. And you couldn't have just, I don't know, left it on a table somewhere and gone home? Well, that's just it, see? I couldn't. A job halfway done, well, it's worse than not done at all, my old man always said. That's very astute. Allow me a little dignity. Thank you kindly, ma'am. I was looking around for someone to ask for help when someone grabbed me and said that they'd caught me. I know you don't know anyone's names, but who? Can you describe her? Well, she was stern, I suppose. Beaky, if you'll excuse me saying. Angela. Yes. I think I remember one of the other ones calling her that. It's quite a blur for me after that, if I'm being honest. I was scared out of my wits as soon as she nabbed me. What about the blood on your tunic? Blood? What blood? Your tunic was bloodied. Well, that was one of the first things I was told. I left my tunic in the cart. I was only there to deliver a letter. Explain. I hadn't worn my tunic since the day prior. I swear to you, I wasn't wearing no tunic when Angela grabbed me by the ear. We stared at each other in silence for a moment. I wanted to believe him, but that required believing that there was a much deeper conspiracy at work than I could have imagined. We were both so still that I could hear the wood above us creaking and bending. It was almost as if the building itself was breathing. Finally, the silence was broken by the door atop the stairs opening. Are you satisfied? We should go back soon. We cannot miss luncheon. Have you seen it? Have you seen my tunic? What is he talking about? His tunic. The one covered in blood. He says he wasn't wearing it the morning he was found. Impossible. I saw the thing myself. It is ghastly. I swear I wasn't wearing it. It's true, damn you, somebody's lying. I have seen it, and it is bloodied indeed, and I can have Eustace pull it out of storage to show you. However, I'm being betrayed. I'm being set up. Anyone else could have gone to my cart and taken it. You were only there for a short while, no? Did you pass anyone on your way from the cart to the library? No, I didn't. Then it's just your word against a bloody tunic, and I must say it's not very convincing. You just said that you believed me. And I do, but I'm not the one who needs convincing, unfortunately. You are. I hear all those keys jingling. You just let me go. You'll never hear from me again, I swear. I'll run away. I'll find another job somewhere else. You will do no such thing. Well, curse both of you then. Some help you are. Is there anyone you know here who you think might have had it out for you? I just can't imagine anyone doing such a horrible thing. No. No? No. Well, that will have to do for now. I hope you learned something useful, Hedwig, for all of our sakes. Wait. There's one more thing that may help my cause. There's someone who can vouch for me not wearing my tunic that morning. Who? Sister Catherine. The other one. I thought you didn't pass anyone on the way in. She was in the library when I went up there to find Catherine, the other Catherine. Oh, God rest her. Well, it's certainly not much, but it might be a start. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Has word been sent back down to the village about why I'm gone? Yes? Oh. Well, I guess that's good, I suppose. And have you heard any word back? I have not. Oh, it's a shame. He looked utterly defeated, so much so that I couldn't bear looking at him any longer. A small part of me wanted to wrench the keys from Mother Superior's hand and free the wretch myself. Ma'am, you had me promise you I was telling the truth, and I did. Will you promise to find whoever did this to me? I can't promise that. I can't promise what I don't know is possible. Well, do you promise me you'll try? Please? Yes. I promise you I'll do my utmost. We bowed to the poor young man and headed back up the precarious staircase to the outside world. I dared not turn around to see his expression as we left. I couldn't bear it. The Superior and I didn't speak on the walk back to the Abbey. I was torn between feeling curious about the wide world I had stepped into and worrying that someone in the stone buildings ahead of us was watching. I half expected an arrow to come sailing over the wall and strike me dead in the chest. However, almost as soon as this gory image crossed my mind, the fog between us and the monastery thickened. I found this comforting, as if I was perhaps being watched over by God on my righteous quest. How very silly of me. The thought carried me for a little while, though.
James didn't do it, Behemoth. You're crazy if you think he did. How dare you? I've never met anybody more scared in my life. And not scared in like the I'm caught way. Legend's gotta be late today.
I see. What happened?
Well, a cat happened, I think.
After a brisk walk through the grounds, the Superior and I had approached the rectory. According to her, we had made perfect time. However, the rectory hall was empty when we arrived. Now, Darcy was explaining to an increasingly bewildered Superior that Lynn-Barrow had yet another mystery within its walls. A cat?
I was roasting the duck when I heard some rustling, and then some pots fell over behind me.
Oh dear.
It could have been a ghost, and I was wondering if it was a ghost at first, but then I heard it meow, so it was probably a cat.
Well, that's a relief, at least.
It could be both. Anyway, while I was picking up the pots, I think it tried to eat the duck because I heard it yowling and then it ran out the door.
Poor thing. Probably singed its whiskers. It's a disgusting little creature, and I won't be having it bringing the plague in here.
I'm not taking any chances. I'm making a new lunch, and that's why it'll be late.
Good. Is someone looking for the vermin?
Eustace.
Godspeed to her. Is everyone else informed of the delay?
Nearly everyone was milling about outside the rectory ready for lunch, so I had to disappoint them. I think Adela and Marta are still in the cellars.
And I suppose Moira was on her way to bell duty? Well, it seems like everything's in order. I look forward to the meal. She nodded at Darcy, who didn't seem to be paying her any attention, and then ducked out of the kitchen.
Yep, Soup, everything's in order. That's why somebody died.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry.
You're alright, my friend. I just wish you wouldn't pretend nothing's happening, hanging over all of us at the moment.
I understand.
Well, what can you do? Some people are just detached from it all.
Do you need any help cooking?
I've got it in order. Thank you for the offer, though. You're already a big help with the carrots this morning.
I gave Darcy a little bow and stepped out of the kitchen. I heard the bell, but there's no food. Well, there was an incident in the kitchen, so things are going to be late today. No, I know, but the bell just rang, so... Hello, you two. Ready for lunch? No, actually. It's gonna be late today, apparently. Oh no, and I already rang the... Yeah. Oh, whoopsie daisy. I've been so busy today. Well, me too. Oh, really? What have you been up to? Well, after service this morning, I felt really tired, so I took a nap. Oh no! Were you up late again last night? What do you mean again? Oh, come on now, I know you. Don't listen to her. She's crazy. Moira laughed and pulled Flora into a one-armed hug, which Flora seemed to appreciate very little. Given that we had both seen Flora emerge from the Misericorde last night, it seemed that Moira was entirely correct, although I was determined not to take sides. Have either of you seen a cat? Supposedly that's the villain responsible for the lunch delay. A cat? Would we even need one? I've never even seen a mouse here. Darcy said one got into the kitchen and was knocking things around. Got too close to the fire, poor little creature. It's just a cat. Do you like cats, Hedwig? I don't know, really. I imagine they're quite sweet. Oh, of course. Silly me, always forgetting. You've never seen a cat? I suppose she wouldn't have had one in herself. Oh. Right. Well, they're a bit creepy, I think. I wouldn't know. The devil plays with the sinner like the cat with a mouse, after all. Come to think of it, are there any cats in the Bible? Only one, actually. Mentioned offhand in a letter of Jeremiah as part of Baruch. Huh? Goodness, you really are a scholar. Hold on. What about lions? What about them? Never mind. I flushed red. It was deeply embarrassing to be bested this way, and especially by Flora. I wasn't even sure she actually read the Bible. Well, it goes to show all of us have places to brush up on in our understanding of Scripture. Indeed. I smiled weakly at the pair of them and took my leave. I was feeling quite strained after the morning's stressful events, and I wasn't sure how much more social interaction I could handle before eating. I was angrier than I should have been about Flora's observation about lions. Angry at her or myself? I wasn't quite sure. Either way, I certainly did not feel up to the task of playing Inquisitor with Catherine. I decided to go for a stroll around the paths between the rectory and the garden. I'd been surprised by Darcy's shocking outburst, relatively at least, as soon as the superior had been out of earshot, but I was now finding myself agreeing with her. In total, the events of the past 2 days, well, day and a half, really, had been unlike anything I could have possibly imagined while whittling away the hours in my cell. Do you find it mad, too? I'd seen a ghost, or a devil, in front of my very eyes the night before. Yet here I was, wandering around the Abbey grounds, overwhelmed by the prospect of talking to any more human beings for a little while. The others hadn't believed me when I told them about the monstrous apparition, and it was that doubt, I think, that might have kept me from unraveling completely. At that moment, the most terrifying prospect in front of me was sharing a meal in a room with someone who potentially had stolen a man's tunic to cover up a vicious murder. But then surely all of that paled in comparison to what I had seen the night prior, an impossible creature, threatening me with its blade before disappearing without a trace. If I had held either of these scenarios in my head for too long, the grim tangibility of Sister Catherine's murder, or the possibility that I had seen some kind of devil with my own eyes, I felt faint. No, I felt worse than faint. I felt like St. Vincent on the rack, having to choose exactly which end of myself I'd prefer to have burned, one thought at a time. Are you writing any of this down, by the way?
No, but we're taking some pictures.
Not that I'd mind if you did. She might not approve, though. I hear she holds quite fast to her rules, despite all appearances. Anyway. While wandering, I found myself at the door to the chapel. I felt compelled to enter. What better place to collect myself? If anything could ease my mind at this point, it would be a moment's prayer. With some difficulty, I swung open the heavy door. I strolled through the aisle, taking a moment to gaze up at the high ceiling. To feel at peace for just a moment. We've got to stop meeting like this. Ah! Sorry. It can be a little shadowy in here. That's quite all right. I'm just learning that I'm easily startled since leaving my cell.
Hey, nobody could blame you for that. How are you adjusting today? Did you start writing?
I did, as a matter of fact.
Lovely. Eustace wasn't too hard on you?
No. Liar.
That's good. I'm sure you'll end up locking horns eventually, so be ready.
Really? Eustace seems so quiet, generally.
She is, but it's really easy to rile her up, especially if you disagree with her about something.
She and Catherine used to bicker a lot, I take it?
Oh, endlessly. Especially about chronicling.
Margaret extended a hand to the pew nearest us. Care to sit? Of course. We sat down together. Margaret gazed at the pulpit briefly before continuing. Eustace is very intelligent, and Catherine was too. And intelligent people sometimes enjoy having a go at each other for sport. It's how they show affection. What on earth would Catherine write that would irritate Eustace so much?
I didn't read much of her chronicling, to tell you the truth. I don't think anyone here does. The job's really about writing down for people to argue about years later.
I suppose if we're living here, reading about it wouldn't be very interesting.
Catherine had the same thought. She wrote about all kinds of things.
I'm meant to do that as well, I think.
The letters? Yeah. Those were her sticking point. I think you're meant to just copy them word for word to mark time, but Catherine would go quite deep on some of them. There was one instance, a couple of years ago.
Yes?
Actually, no, I thought of a better one. Have you ever heard of Rheims Cathedral?
No, actually.
It's a very big cathedral in France. One of the biggest, in fact. It's quite grand. Anyway, it was damaged in a great fire, and Catherine was meant to write that down. Instead, she demanded to write a letter to the municipality over the smallest detail. There was a note in the letter about how the King of France had granted the city an octroi, and that funds for the repairs were coming from a tax on salt.
What?
That was more or less what everyone else said. Catherine was furious, though.
What on earth for?
Well, certainly I think none of us would have noticed, but she had a point. France taxed salt very heavily, and Catherine thought it was highly unfair that the building was going to be repaired with money she said was being stolen from the poor.
I must admit, this is completely beyond my understanding.
Everyone needs salt, and everyone in France is taxed on it equally. It's how you make food survive the winter, for one thing, but it's an incredibly useful and valuable thing. I dread to think how much we spend on salt here, to tell you the truth, but mercifully we don't have to pay quite the same way French do.
It just seems like a petty thing to pick at. The building needed repairing.
Yeah, but Catherine was beside herself for days. I remember her stalking around the halls, muttering to herself in very poor French, which was meant to be damn your spires or some such. Eustace forbade her to write about it in a letter to the diocese on the subject.
She was going to tell the diocese, damn your spires?
Margaret threw her head back and laughed, clearly enjoying a fond memory. The diocese? No. She was demanding a letter to the king. My goodness. Catherine sulked for days after Eustace told her off for that one. All over a building. It isn't about the building, it's about the very soul of the church, is what Catherine would tell you. She really found it distasteful that the repairs would be built at the expense of basic people's needs, and wanted to make that known to anyone she could with a say in the matter. It wasn't the only time she got herself worked up over a building either. She heard about the last remaining ruins of the lighthouse of Alexandria being paved over to build a way for it, and she spent a whole week badgering Adela, asking if she knew enough Arabic to help her write a letter to complaint to the Sultan. I can understand her position, it seems so fruitless. It seems rather cruel to put it that way, but Margaret grinned and shifted in her seat to face me. That's the essence of most of the arguments that Catherine got into around here. You're not wrong, but... and so on. It sounds quite exhausting. I suddenly felt my stomach drop. Not to speak ill of her, I mean... Margaret laughed again. You're fine. People said far worse of her while she lived. Angela once accused her of writing her own 12 conclusions. I find it rather touching that she can still put people in awkward positions like this. Her influence reaches beyond the grave. Beyond the grave? Do you believe in ghosts? Spirits? That's quite a question. I apologize if it's a touch strange to ask, you're not the first person who's mentioned feeling Catherine's presence lingering, or wished aloud for it. It's not a problem, but I should warn you that if this is an extension of your practical joke, the others are going to find bringing Catherine into the proceedings very distasteful. Would you believe me if I insisted to you that there was no prank? I'd be curious to know what other explanation you could give. If you really saw what you claimed to see, why are you still here? Why didn't you start running and stop only when you reached the next village over? I'm still mulling over the idea of running, to tell you the truth, but I don't think I could. That's interesting. Believe it or not, that makes me slightly more inclined to accept your story. Really? Very slightly. I have no explanation for what I saw, only that I saw it. A real monster, menacing me with a wicked blade. It sounds absolutely chilling. The thing is, if I ran, where would I go? 2 days ago, I hadn't been outside of my little room. I felt like if I left, that you'd be experiencing the same confusion 10 times over. Yes, that's a good way to put it. The devil you know. Hey, I understand the feeling. But you don't believe I actually saw anything. You don't accept the existence of ghosts at all, evil spirits and the like. I was practically begging for reassurance at this point. I wouldn't say that. I saw something once, in the cellar, real late at night. A little devil with bulbous eyes and malformed teeth. In the cellars? But don't you sneak down there to raid the pantry some nights? Well, as I said, the devil you know. And sometimes I get quite hungry. You're pulling my leg, aren't you? Now why would I do something like that? We sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Margaret stood up and stretched her arms above her head. I think that's enough of that seat for now. Luncheon will still be a bit, correct? Let's go for a walk. You and me. Certainly. She walked briskly out of the chapel. I was too slow to help her with the large wooden doors, but she managed quite well enough on her own. She ushered me past, and then took a step ahead as the door closed. Margaret wanted to lead me somewhere, and I could not guess where. To tell you the truth, I've always had mixed opinions on the existence of ghosts. I've seen so many things that ended up being tricks of the night. Figures in the fog, that sort of thing. For years, the knocking and scraping in the walls here kept me up at night. But these buildings are very old, and they're not particularly well built.
That's the sort of thing I like to try and comfort myself with as well.
But it's a bit different when you're all alone at night, isn't it?
Yes. So you do believe me?
Perhaps I do, perhaps I don't. But either way, there's something here I'd like to show you.
We were walking up the stairs to the second floor.
Hold on. We're gonna need a candle for this.
She jogged into the dormitories and after a moment emerged with a lit candle on a pricket.
Come with me.
She took me down the hall, toward the intersection where I had seen the sword-wielding specter. There's no blood or anything here. We already looked.
We're going a bit further than that.
My heart jumped into my throat. Are we going down the hall to my cell?
Just about.
We walked together quietly, just a little while.
This hall always made me feel uncomfortable.
For a moment, I felt affronted that Margaret would even dare talk about what this hall might make her feel in my presence, but I suppressed the urge to chastise her. Nevertheless, walking down this hallway felt more precarious than my first encounter with the stairs. I take it you didn't come to the Agioscope very often, then?
Not for your advice, I'm afraid.
Ah. We arrived at my cell. Margaret handed me the candle, and I began rapping her knuckles against the stone wall. Margaret handed me the candle and began rapping her knuckles against the stone wall. Eventually, she found whatever it was she was looking for. She inserted her fingers between two of the old stones and pulled. To my shock, the wall swung open to reveal a passageway wide enough, just about, for one person. What?
There's passageways all over this place. This isn't what I wanted to show you, though. Follow me.
She took the candle back and entered the narrow tunnel. I followed her nervously.
Most abbeys have passages like this because there needs to be some space between the walls. See? It's an architectural thing. I think it helps the air as well. It's what my father used to say, anyway. So this passageway isn't in and of itself particularly interesting. However,
we kept walking until we finally came to a corner.
Here we are.
She took a few steps around the bend and beckoned me to join her.
Like I was saying before, I've always been non-committal about things like luck and ghosts and curses and so on. But this always bothered me. And there have been too many things happening lately for me to discount it entirely. Parts of the Abbey falling down, Catherine's death, and now your ghost.
By this, you mean...
Come closer.
She held the candle out in front of her to better illuminate what she was referring to.
I try not to take this passage anymore, because this makes me nervous.
I gasped when I realized what she was looking at. One of the bricks lining the passageway had a detestable shape etched into it. I didn't know what it was, but it filled me with enough dread just to look at that I knew it was wrong. Evil. My stomach churned as I remembered the superior's words to me about the provenance of the abbey. Was the construction of this place really so mysterious? How could something like this have been allowed to make it into the very walls of the building? The work of some possessed builder, no doubt. A house of God built with no oversight and ill intent? I speak of it eloquently now, of course. However, in the moment, all I could do, all that I could muster, was something far less considered. Oh my God. Margaret grinned wickedly.
Steady on. What was it you told me about cursing?
I didn't speak a word the whole walk back to the chapel. I was deeply disturbed. I didn't know what that horrible symbol meant, and I didn't want to. One look at it was enough to tell me that something dark was at work within the walls, something I didn't want to meddle with under any circumstances. We arrived at the chapel doors, and Margaret turned to me. "Cheer up. It's a bit grim, but I've lived with it for ages. I try not to muck about with the unknown, and it doesn't muck about with me. Much, anyway. All that being said, I think I might take credit for the prank if I were you. Even if it wasn't you. Why would I do a thing like that? I don't know. Just seems like something you'd want people to think you were capable of. You've got to keep people guessing, yeah? You got to make a name for yourself." I think I'll stick to being a chronicler. Oh, right. Yeah. I forgot to mention it, but I'm sure you'll do great work at all that. You ask good questions. It might annoy Eustace, but I think that's critical for the job. I'm afraid most of my words since leaving the cell have been questions, and I'm afraid I don't quite have the same verve that Catherine seems to have had. There is no need to worry about it. Don't write like Catherine. Write like Hedwig. I bowed my head, attempting to hide my flushed cheeks. My starved pride had allowed this sliver of a compliment to rush to my head. I didn't feel too chuffed for long, though, because... Eee! The chapel bell had just begun to rung above us, scaring me out of my wits. I must have jumped several feet into the air out of shock. Margaret was grinning ear to ear when I came back down to earth. I clutched my chest instinctively and doubled over, trying to regain my composure. "Sorry! The superior told me to run and ring the bell for luncheon, and I didn't see you two down there." I could hear her voice calling out to us from above, like some apologetic angel. Margaret called up in response, apparently unfazed. "It's all right." "How on earth did we miss you?" "I came in through the back door. The superior..." "Never locks it?" "Yeah." "I really am so sorry, Hedwig. I didn't mean to give you such a scare." "That's quite all right, Moira." Luncheon passed without much incident. Now that I was no longer expected to sit through extended introductions of myself and others, I could enjoy my food in relative peace. Darcy's cooking was excellent and much appreciated, although I was beginning to realize that the emotional reservoir that eating refilled was shrinking with each passing meal. Part of this, perhaps, was the worried anticipation that someone might casually mention seeing the superior and I walking back from the hospitalum earlier. The amount of secrets I was responsible for already felt unsustainable, but the idea of those secrets coming to light, that was even worse. I participated in the conversation around the table superficially, just enough to avoid being asked if something was wrong. I was unsure I'd be able to lie and say no. The Bible, of course, has plenty to say about lying. Bearing false witness breaks a commandment, although in my time locked in a cell I had read many musings from scholars smarter than I about whether or not that meant all untruths or if just the commandment was speaking strictly about matters of court. I've told you my views on loose interpretation, but the Bible is inerrant. There is no getting around the fact that the midwives lying to the Pharaoh's men saved many lives, for example, but still, it was difficult to feel like I was acting all selflessly as they did. I felt closer to Augustine than Cassian. After luncheon, we all filed out of the rectory to return to our duties. Eustace made a beeline to the stairs up to the library, and even though we had made up after this morning's spat, I felt inclined to keep away from her a little bit longer. Catherine slipped out of the rectory before I could ask her about James's story. I must admit I was relieved to once again have an excuse to avoid that conversation. I was more interested in the symbol Margaret had showed me, which I feared indicated something far more sinister than I or the superior were prepared for. Margaret seemed wholly unperturbed throughout her meal. How? I couldn't understand it. Just thinking about that twisted shape made me sweat. It It had been so close to my cell. How had I never felt it? Had it woven some sort of dark spell on me and I just hadn't noticed? Was it responsible for who I was? The mistakes that I had continued to make, the concessions I had made without verbal complaint to fit in with these women, the lack of a fight I had put up to the superior as she broke the seal on my cell, was that thing responsible? These thoughts ran rings in my head until I felt as if I had been sprinting in circles for too long. I did my best to shut them out and decided instead to wander down to the cellars, somewhat hopeful that it would keep me out of sight for the afternoon. After all, the cool air of the cellars would perhaps help clear my head. Ah, Hedwig! Would you be so kind as to settle an argument between myself and Marta here? I had chosen poorly. Argument? Try this. Is it supposed to smell like that? Not you too. It does smell absolutely rank, Adela. Adela was holding a stinking ladle over an opened cask, waving it between our faces with a great deal of indignation. As I told you yesterday, Sister Marta, it smells like this temporarily. It gives the wine its flavor. And you can already taste it in this barrel. Go on. Must I? Better you than I. I'm afraid I might keel over if I inhale much more of this miasma. With trepidation, I took the ladle from Adela's hand and held it up to my lips. The half-finished wine smelled truly foul, enough to make me cough. However, Adela was glaring at me with such determination that I was ever so slightly more afraid of her than the liquid. Closing my eyes, I braved a taste. It was actually not that bad. It was nowhere near as disgusting as the smell. However, it was clearly not meant for drinking yet, and whatever sweetness I could detect on my tongue was soon covered up by a watery and weak fruit flavor, which was all soon replaced by the overpowering stench of the ladle and the barrel. It's coming together. Unbelievable. See? Even half fermented. The power that sherry holds is undeniable. Thank you for the follow. How long will it take to come into its own? It takes several years to properly ferment. This batch is quite young. It only started when I first arrived. I've been dragging Sister Marta into the future. Thank God that isn't the only one I have to work with. You have help. Surely you're not rotating all the casks throughout the Solera yourself. Oh, of course not. Stinkiest ladle we've ever seen. What's the Solera? All these barrels. They have to move. You bottle some of the oldest wine from the bottom cask and then refill with some of the youngest. Then rotate that back to the top and it keeps the quality consistent. And it means that some of the oldest batch is in every bottle. She took a moment to spoon the ladle into the liquid and try to sip herself. She smacked her lips and looked thoughtful. That sounds arduous. Too right. Helps to have some unruly younger sisters around to threaten with manual labor. I'm always happy to help with the winemaking. Believe me, I know you are. So, does Darcy grow grapes too? Oh, no. I use some fruits from the garden to flavor the other wines, but the grapes are from the village. The slope of the Tor is good for vineyards, but it gets too cold up here on the Abbey proper. They only recently finished the last harvest and brought it to us, hence the Solera. There certainly is an awful lot of work to do around here, it sounds like. Thank you for saying so. Some people don't appreciate just how complicated our work can be. Speaking of, I should really tend to my next task. Sister Hedwig, would you walk with me? I bowed my head to Marta, who responded in kind even though she was preoccupied with sealing up the test cask. Adela walked me back through the rows of wine barrels and up the stairs, striding with purpose. I struggled to keep up as she crested the staircase into the halls around the cloister. Sister Hedwig, how are you finding Lynbarrow Tor Abbey? Well, I'm not used to it yet, obviously. Yes, it is obvious. I hope you don't mind me saying. Not at all. I'm also new here, and I can tell that you're suffering in the same ways I suffered. Oh, was I? Was I suffering in the same way as Adela? I nearly blurted that out, but managed to restrain myself. You are anxious, you are confused, and you're eager to please everyone you meet. I was the same way for a while, but you must not be afraid to stand your ground when you feel you must. I don't know what you mean. You're doing it right now, Sister Hedwig. You know exactly what I mean, because I'm describing you as you're acting for me as we speak. What's this about, Adela? Have I offended you? Only my sense of justice. I want to do what's best for you, Sister Hedwig. I want to see you thrive. Don't retreat into your shell like Sister Flora does. She's got an excuse. She's not yet 20, but you're nearing 30, are you not? Tell me, Sister Hedwig, was the sherry really so bad? It was quite disgusting. Of course it was. Sister Marta's gonna ruin all of it before it's due. But surely it couldn't be anything but foul midway through the aging process. I'm no expert, but I thought wine took time. It would taste strange no matter what, but the taste I had after you, it was all wrong. I've worked on many wines, and I've learned how to taste how wine's going to taste. And that sherry, it is not coming together as you described. It was more of a guess. It was a lie. It was a polite one, but it was untrue all the same. I'm sorry, but shouldn't you be telling Marta and not me? Oh, I will be marching back to Marta in just a moment. Believe me, Sister Hedwig. But I want to help you as well. Never be afraid to speak your mind. The others will respect that much more than this endless acquiescence. I find that hard to believe. See, you're already catching on. No, I'm not practicing. I just don't understand. I don't want to fight anyone. Who said anything about fighting? I'm not saying you should be contrary. I'm just saying you shouldn't pretend to be someone you're not. Just be Hedwig. You're not the first person to tell me this today, believe it or not. All the more reason to take me seriously. Please. I've been in your position before. I felt lost and overlooked, but I became so much happier when I stopped trying to please everyone. I had no way to explain to Adela that beyond being thrust into an entirely new world of social interaction, I was also trying my best to ingratiate myself to everyone for a reason. Butting heads with Sister Angela was more than enough conflict for me, and given that I was here to unmask a murderer, I felt that drawing too much attention to myself would be unwise. Being the newcomer had surely made me visible enough without tempting fate. But there was more to it than that. Quite simply, I had no idea who Hedwig was. Anyway, I've got other business to attend to, and then I'll be giving Sister Marta a piece of my mind. And then by supper we'll be friends again. That's how things work. You gotta be strong. I'll try. See that you do. I'm on your side, Sister Hedwig. Adela gave me a surprisingly firm pat on the shoulder and left. I stood in the corner we'd been conversing in for a short while. I'd found Adela's penchant for romantic language somewhat charming up until now, but I didn't appreciate those treacly platitudes. I was bouncing between embarrassment and fury. I needed a moment to myself. It wasn't yet even close to supper time. The days here, it seemed, would be excruciatingly long until I settled into a routine. As I calmed down, I thought about where I should go next. Well, I'd already bothered Eustace enough for one day. I didn't want Darcy to get sick of me, and I had just left the cellars. Moreover, I hadn't a clue where anyone would be at this time of day. Margaret, Catherine, Moira, anyone, really. I yearned for the comfort of my cell. At least there, my tasks had been clear as crystal. Around this time, I'd usually be settling in to copy down some Bible pages after reflecting on some scripture. It was almost automatic. Perhaps I'd while away the evening illuminating a page in gold leaf. With a start, I remembered the last page I'd transcribed before leaving the spell. The book! The book I'd thrown out the window! Surely it'd be weathered by the elements by now, but I felt a strong urge to go and reclaim that half-finished tome. If nothing else, it would be a comforting reminder of the last time I'd had a clear sense of purpose.
The urge to return to the cell.
It wasn't a terribly long walk to the side of the building my old cell window had faced. There were no paths on that side of the building. However, the terrain was uneven, and the grass quite tall. It was strange seeing the buildings from this side. In the courtyards and cloister, everything looked flat and mathematical, but here the earth rose and fell like waves around the stone. There was an immense forest not far from the abbey on this end, and my heart leapt into my throat as I remembered the mysterious figure I'd seen standing not far from where I was searching now. I recognized my window, high up on the wall. There actually weren't many openings on this side of the building. Most of the glass windows faced inward, toward the cloister. The book was not here. A chill ran up my back. I had seen it the morning after my tantrum, clear as day. Was I truly going mad? Had I hallucinated a book before the ghost and goat? I scanned the tall grass around me. Maybe it had slid down the hill or bounced in a fashion I hadn't noticed. Perhaps I was simply looking in the wrong spot. No, try as I might, I couldn't find it. Unless it had been swallowed by the earth, the book had been moved. Who in their right mind would want a half-finished Bible soaked by rain and tainted with my own bile, no less? Then my foot slipped. I rolled down the hill with a yelp. I tumbled several times, legs over head, end over end. Hey, don't laugh. It was quite terrifying. What if I had broken a bone or fallen into some inescapable hole? I came to a rest against a small tree. I scrambled to my feet, using the trunk for leverage. I spat a little grass out of my mouth and groaned as I realized that my habit was covered in dirt and grass stains. Oh, what a mess. It was then that I saw something highly curious. A piece of fabric, dangling from a branch on the tree I was leaning against. It was a small strip of black cloth. I carefully detached it from the sharp bit of branch it was snagged on. That would mean the figure I had seen that night outside my window. It was real. I felt some small amount of relief that I was at the very least not completely mad, but then I doubled back. Could a ghost or a demon not take a corporeal form? The monster I had seen that night almost had certainly been solid. Neither of these ideas were particularly comforting. What's more, I certainly wouldn't make any headway on the mystery stranded out here. I stuffed this clue into my white stocking and began to hike myself back up the hill to the abbey. I had not fallen that far afield, but it was still quite a steep trek. I decided I would walk around the other way from whence I'd come, just to complete my impromptu tour of the outside of the abbey. It was actually a little more even and flat the further I ventured around this side, which was a relief. I was able to stick close to the wall. I didn't feel like falling down any more hillocks that afternoon. Hello. I jumped. I hadn't noticed a little square window, low on the outside wall of the building, through which I could just barely make out Darcy's face. Goodness, you startled me. Oh, hello, Darcy.
What you doing out there?
Oh, I felt like going for a walk. I hadn't seen the Abbey from this side just yet.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yes, it was just a whim, I suppose. It's giving me a sense of place, though.
Did you fall over?
Yeah, I did. Oh, no. Oh, be nice. No, sorry. I'm not trying to be cruel. It's just that we've all done it. You've fallen down this side of the hill? Oh, it happens to be all the time when I go hunting for mushrooms and so on. Oh, I see. I bet it looked rather funny when you fell, though. Did you roll? Yes. Good, that's how you stay safe. Really now? Yeah, if you go stiff, you'll break something. Flora did that once. Oh no! Yeah, it was fine. She's young. Her bones are supposed to break. It's good for the constitution. Well, I'm not sure if they're supposed to, but better to break something young so it can heal. That's right. Well, what are you up to? What room are you in? Oh, this? It's just a funny little window in one of the halls. Oh, I suppose I'm close to the cloister on this end? That's right, and above the croft. Fascinating. Buildings are strange. Anyway, I was just on my way back from picking some bitter vetch for the stores. Oh, should I be worried about our stockpiles? Oh, no, not at all. But it never hurts to have around just in case. That's wise. Well, I should be getting on. I should quite like to be back within the walls. Absolutely. She smiled widely and then disappeared from the window. The rest of the walk back was uneventful. When I finally made it around to the cloister, I let out a weary sigh. My clothes had only just been washed, and I'd already made a mess of them, and the tumble down the hill had left me feeling a little queasy and out of sorts. Hedwig? Oh, Catherine! Hello! You look like you fell asleep in a field. You all right? Oh, yeah, I just took a little fall. Well, at least was down something grassy and not the stairs. Don't be cruel. I stomped my foot and puffed at Catherine, who looked bewildered. Excuse me. Would it be funny if I fell down some stairs? Would that be amusing if I broke my neck because I haven't used stairs as often as you? Hedwig, whoa. Hey, you're being a touch dramatic. Oh, am I? Am I being... I'd gulped up a little bit of black bile once more. I felt dizzy. Hedwig? Hedwig? She reached out to stop me from collapsing. Oh, dear. He overstimulated again today. I gurgled something unintelligible in response. Catherine hoisted me to my feet and began to lead me toward the stairs, her nose wrinkled. Ugh. We need to get Moira to take a look at you again, I think. That doesn't seem normal. It was perfectly normal for me. As I half-heartedly walked with Catherine up the stairs, she declined to crack a joke this time. I reasoned that my propensity for spilling black bile all over the place was just my punishment for breaking a lifelong promise to God. It didn't matter how noble the cause the Superior had thrust upon me was. I had been an anchoress, and now I wasn't. This is just how it's going to be, I'm afraid. What? The vomiting? Oh, this is exactly what I was talking about. You're acting hysterical. I broke a sacred vow. We had arrived at the dorms. Catherine plopped me onto the bed, but didn't let me go. Instead, she squeezed my face with her hand and bent down to peer at me. I'm no doctor, but you look ill. Just like she had done when we first met, she licked her thumb and rubbed it roughly against my face. And dirty, honestly. I hiccuped again, and a little more bile oozed out of my mouth onto my hood. Ugh, oh God, stay put. I'm getting Moira. She let me fall onto the pillow and left in a hurry. I groaned loudly, feeling more frustrated than unwell at this point. I closed my eyes, just for a moment. Hedwig? Moira and Catherine were looming over me, looking concerned. Moira? Oh dear. Still feeling a bit off, are we? She was acting really out of sorts, and then coughed all that up again. Hedwig, is this more or less bile than you expelled yesterday? Less? I think that would make sense to me.
She's fine, Catherine. She's only adjusting. It's not, Moira let out a gentle chuckle. It's not the Black Death, Catherine. Unless you've got some buboes you haven't told us about, Hedwig. Buboes? Moira reached beneath my arms and rummaged around. It was so sudden that I wasn't able to react. I was even more taken aback when she moved her hands between my legs and squeezed my inner thighs without warning. Nothing.
Catherine, you really mustn't worry. She's just not used to the air outside her cell. Bodies react strangely to changes in their environment. It is highly normal. This was so humiliating. I felt like livestock being inspected for ticks. She was, very weak. Not to mention, a little out of sorts. Her attitude was just really strange. Catherine, I think sometimes you just have that effect on people.
Catherine looked affronted, but Moira simply took her by the shoulder and led her toward the door.
She just needs a little rest again. I'll bring you some more of Darcy's mint later, Hedwig. And if you pile your clothes up, I can see to it that they get washed.
I grunted in appreciation. Moira gave me a little smile and ushered Catherine out of the dormitory. I shut my eyes, but unlike the last time I had expelled all this goo, I wasn't particularly tired. I felt humiliated, stretched thin, and emotionally exhausted, but not tired. My mind was running circles, in fact. I opened my eyes once more. If I really was to rest in my room for the afternoon, I should make something of my time. I scrambled out of bed to strip down as Moira had requested, bundling my habit up into a ball and leaving it near the door. The shred of cloth I'd recovered from outside was still in my stocking. I hid it under my pillow for safekeeping. I got down on all fours to reach under the bed. Perhaps now was the perfect time to read that play Catherine the First had left for me. Have you ever read Medea? I didn't make it through the whole play in that one sitting, I'll admit. I found the whole thing intriguing, although extremely confusing. I fear that I simply didn't have room in my head for some of the knowledge required to enjoy it fully. These pagan gods and foreign ideals, they confused me. I assumed that there was a point to all of it that Catherine might have been able to teach me, but without her guidance, I felt lost. To be frank, the section I read was perfectly ghastly to my understanding. A jilted wife plots to kill her husband's new lover, and the new lover's father along with her. I suppose they didn't have Bible scripture to turn to in those days, so it was an interesting window into a world before the Word. However, when the heroine's thoughts wandered to murdering her own children in kind to prove the cause as much pain as she possibly could, I closed the book. Oh, it was too horrible to even think about. I'm not sure what I had expected, but in my memory, Catherine had been so excited to share this with me, suggesting that I would appreciate its contents. What on earth could she have thought of me to assume that I would have enjoyed this, of all tales? I wasn't angry, I suppose. It was just a story after all, and I had no clue what to make of it. Really, it hurt most that Catherine wasn't around to explain what she had been thinking when she planned to give me this. I'm sure she would have a good answer. I did eventually doze off after reading a bit of the play. It wasn't for long, however. Moira soon arrived to take my laundry away and provide me with some more mint. Since I didn't really feel like walking around the Abbey in my nightgown in the middle of the day, I was stuck in my dormitory. This would usually suit me just fine, although with nothing but a play I'd had my fill of to read, I soon became restless. Luckily, I eventually had a knock on the door.
Are you awake, dearie?
Yes, please come in.
Moira told me you were feeling a little under the weather, so I brought you some sage water.
Oh, how lovely. Thank you. Charity set a pitcher and mug down on my small reading desk and sat down in the little chair. She poured a generous amount of the drink into the mug and handed it to me, which I accepted gratefully. This is very soothing. I've always sworn by it myself. Drink it once a night. Would be dead without it, I reckon. Really? Maybe. Maybe not. But I wouldn't take the chance and stop now, would you?
No, I suppose not. Darcy isn't half clever with plants. Could well be that she's discovered a new way to grow sage that'll make us last forever. Well, when we're all over 100 years old, we'll know who to thank then, won't we? Charity chuckled and wagged a finger at me. Careful now, I might not be as far off from that age as I look. You don't look a day over 30, Sister Charity. I couldn't help but feel jovial around Charity. We had barely spoken, but there was an aura of kindness and warmth around her that I could sense immediately. Oh, watch it, Cheeky. Has Flora been putting you up to flattery like that? No, actually, Flora and I haven't spoken all that much yet, I'm afraid. She doesn't speak much at all to anyone until suddenly she won't shut it. Comes with her youth, I suppose. What were you like at her age? Much the same as I am now, I believe. I was in that cell the entire time. Oh, of course. Stupid me. Well, you're remarkably well behaved for someone who hasn't spent any time around people. That much I can tell. Aside from all the fainting and the puking, who hasn't fainted and puked around here? You got everyone good last night with that little prank. I'm surprised Catherine didn't keel over. We're a fragile bunch. Nobody here will judge you for that. And if they do, well, let her who hasn't passed out in the Misericorde cast the first stone. I'd been meaning to ask, what actually happens in there? You know what a Misericorde is, yes? In theory, I know the rules of St. Benedict are slightly less stringently adhered to in there. That's right. You can have four-legged meat in there if you fancy. It's mostly for guests, who aren't to be expected to follow the rules, but we get so few visitors, it's more of a little clubhouse for us. I see. You're welcome to pop in sometime as long as there's room. It isn't a den of sin or anything like that, it's just a touch more relaxed. Mostly the girls play chess and complain about the superior. She let out a hearty laugh and leaned over to flick my arm. I smiled back. I didn't want to get into an argument with Sister Charity of all people, especially when this is the first time we'd really spent any time together. I would like to stop in, to be sure. Only half the nuns can be in there at any given time, so let me or Marta know ahead of time if you do want to hang about. It's not a problem usually, but I do hate having to kick anyone out. Of course. Where does the other half usually spend their leisure time in the evenings? Well, we've all got our own occupations, haven't we? Darcy's got her little projects. Margaret likes to go on wanders. Besides, it's not like the Misericorde is the only place we're allowed to relax. It's just the only place that we can relax and have a spot of lamb. What do you like to do? Well, Sister Marta and I will often sit in the cloister with some wine and gossip the evening away. There's a few wooden chairs down there. It's lovely on summer nights. That sounds so restorative. Not half. When the moon's high, you hardly need a torch to see. The stars are so lovely to watch. I'll have to try that sometime as well. You'll be more than welcome to join us, I'm sure, although I'd worry we'd bore you to death with our old lady chatter. Oh, I'm not much of a conversationalist myself, as I'm sure you've noticed. Pah! You're better at it than Sister Angela, and that's all that really matters. Well, it's all right, girl. Spit it out. She's rather mean, isn't she? Charity started laughing heartily. Goodness gracious. Oh, that's the kindest thing anyone's said about her in recent memory. Well, Sister Angela is a creep and a busybody. If she's been bullying you, you come to me. I'll sort her out for you. We haven't had any run-ins that dramatic, I promise you. Well, regardless, the offer's on the table. She was a right terror to Adela when she first showed up. Flora as well, for that matter. Though Flora might have brought that on herself. Just a little. I snorted, laughing into my sage water. Just a little, just a little. Thank you, Sister Charity. I'll keep that in mind. There was a knock on the door. Charity held up a hand to stop me from getting up myself, and stood to open it herself. Sister Angela was standing on the threshold looking particularly icy. Speak of the devil! Hello, Sister Charity. My ears were burning. How long were you standing there listening, you gangly creep? Not long. Your voice just happens to carry, and it would have been rude of me to interrupt. Sorry, Angela. Don't you dare apologize, Hedwig. I've seen the way Angela treats you, and I know the way she treats all kinds. You have nothing to be sorry for. The firmest I've been with Sister Hedwig is admonishing her for running in the halls. Is she, for some reason, exempt from the rules? Oh, don't give me that. You've been staring daggers at her ever since luncheon yesterday. You're imagining things. I wouldn't be the only one. Have you found Catherine's cat yet? Well, I'm off. It was pleasant chatting with you, Hedwig. I'm off to see Darcy. I have some questions about nectar for her. Angela sneered as Charity pushed past her into the hallway, but held off from saying anything in return. She didn't speak to me either. Instead, she simply dumped a pile of fresh clothes onto the dormitory floor and then turned to leave. Thank you? She did not respond. I carried the embarrassment of that encounter with me for the rest of the afternoon. In the hour or two I had free before supper, I wandered the halls and exchanged pleasantries with anyone who passed me by, but I was preoccupied. And we'll stop right there. Supper tasted like ash.
Yeah. Love Sister Charity, man. Love her. Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Next week, more Misericorde. 2 more episodes. I'm glad everybody's enjoying it so far. Thank you, thank you, thank you.